Everybody, and welcome to this second webinar showcasing the winners of IAB Europe's 2016 Research Awards. I'm an Executive Business Advisor at IAB Europe, and I'm going to host this session this afternoon. So this is the fifth year of our Research Awards, which is designed to recognise and celebrate the contribution made by research to the development of the industry. That's through innovative research projects and also to showcase the teams behind them. The webinar is going to share the winning case studies of the categories: consumer attitudes and behaviour, consumer devices, research and data creation, and the best use of budget. So we're really pleased to see the Research Awards forming part of our mission to prove the value of digital advertising. Again, each year we see a marked increase in quality, both in terms of the depth of detail people give to those entries and also the breadth that we receive across the European market. Great. So today's webinar is going to last about 45 minutes, 35 minutes for presentations and a 10-minute Q&A. And before we start off, I'm just going to take everybody through a quick health and safety check on how to use the webinar controls. Okay. So to ensure that everyone's ready and familiar with the webinar control panel, you can see a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can minimize and maximize by clicking on the double arrow in the upper left-hand corner. So take a moment to practice that if you like. There's a chat panel and a Q&A panel. So you can submit technical queries or questions in the chat panel through to me, and I'll respond to those. And you can submit questions for speakers using the Q&A panel. And Claire, who's with me, will stock those up to the end, okay? Or if the speakers see those questions coming through live during the Q&A session, they may well answer those as we go along. We'll just see how that works out, okay? If you need help during the session, you can raise your hand by clicking the red exclamation mark icon just above the chat panel. Okay, to sum up, technical issues through the chat panel, questions to speakers through the Q&A panel, and help by clicking on the red hand. Okay, let's proceed to introduce this afternoon's speakers. So Andrew Tenzer, who's Head of Insight at BBC Global News, Pilkington, Chief Strategy Officer at IAB UK, Toby Crisp, who's Director of Data Services at Comscore, and Ian Gibbs, Head of Commercial Insight at Guardian News and Media. So welcome to all of you, and I'm now going to hand over to Andrew to tell about the BBC Science of Engagement project. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. So I'm here to talk to you today about the Science of Engagement, which is a piece of research we launched at the beginning of 2016, and it's about content marketing. So really, with marketing, we think it's, and I think we'd all agree that it's a fairly established form of advertising nowadays. So advertisers are spending huge sums of money creating content, and media owners, such as the BBC and other media owners, are creating specialist teams and, in cases, restructuring entire departments to provide the best solutions to its advertisers. And in the next few years, it's anticipated that this area will account for a greater and greater share of advertising budgets, and spend will increase significantly. So, as an industry, it looks and it seems like we're fairly confident that content marketing is an effective advertising medium. However, this is actually based on very little evidence. So around about half of marketeers in the US and countries like Australia actually say that measuring the effectiveness of content-led marketing is a challenge. And this probably isn't too surprising, because this approach is in its infancy compared to other more traditional forms of advertising. But we know that understanding effectiveness is going to be absolutely critical to optimizing future campaigns and ensuring maximum impact for brands involved. Media owners and advertisers will use analytics data as a means of proving effectiveness. This is anything from click-throughs to impressions to dwell times. And we all agree that these numbers are really important. We know that this type of data only tells us a partial story. And so in some cases, brands and publishers will also apply standard advertising effectiveness techniques to understanding the success of a campaign. And of course, they're absolutely right to do so. But we feel there's a pretty big elephant in the room here, and that is that the majority seem to be ignoring the most important aspect, which is, of course, the content itself. So because content marketing is not like a pre-roll or a banner ad, we at BBC don't think that advertising effectiveness and digital analytics alone fully get to the bottom of true engagement and effectiveness. So what we really needed to understand was the full story. We know asking people what they think about a piece of content is quite a difficult thing to do. It's quite a complex question for which people can have to answer. So this actually led us to the idea of teaming up with a company called Crowd Emotion to test content marketing using facial coding. So simply put, the concept of facial coding is that we reveal our true emotions by facial expression. So we seek to conceal these, the underlying emotion we experience still registers on our face. So that means that our face never lies. And we're confident that this would provide the best measurement of engagement with content marketing because it's what people actually feel rather than what they claim to feel. So how does coding work? Well, cams record their facial expressions as they consume the content. The facial movements are then recorded and coded into 6 possible emotions. And it's really important to point out that displaying any of these emotions are a sign of engagement, but they also shouldn't be taken as literal. So, for instance, puzzlement can mean a number of different emotional states, such as being intrigue or deep in thought, much like sadness can mean something like empathy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through kind of 4 key findings, and I'm going to use something to illustrate those points. And it's safe to say with this, there's probably 5 emotions that you would want to achieve with your piece of content that are on screen there, and there's 1 less so, i.e. the rejection. And the first key finding that we see is actually that consumers are much more engaged to content marketing when brand involvement is fully transparent. So what we did is we went with a test and control approach. So this is, we tested multiple pieces of content marketing, and this is an example of the control group who saw the content without any brand labeling or advertising or any labeling stating it was content marketing. And here you can see the response aggregated is actually we see a heightened level of rejection amongst consumers when they're unsure and it's unclear as to what they're reading. However, when the test group see the content, it's a very different story. We see a heightened level of engagement, but a much lower than average level of rejection. So this suggests increased receptivity towards the content when it's clear to consumers what they're reading. And this is really important given what's been going on in the last year or so with some kind of big media owners getting into quite a lot of trouble for kind of misleading their consumers. The second key point is that actually when content marketing is properly executed, it's really trusted. It helps to form opinion. So it works in the same way as good editorial content does. Consumers are much more trusting of content marketing when it's placed in a kind of premium environment. But what we actually found is that we asked respondents whether they agreed with various statements before and after viewing the content, and opinion positively shifted an average 3 times out of 5. So really it's quite simple. If you don't trust or like a piece of content, it's extremely unlikely to change your opinions on the subjects that you're reading about. I suppose to then ask ourselves is, well, what does this mean for brands? And brands over time want to make an emotional connection with consumers. It's something deep rooted in people's kind of subconscious, and we really wanted to understand whether this type of kind of content marketing can actually change consumers' deeply held and entrenched feelings about brands. Simply put, the faster a respondent likes a piece of likes a brand, the more emotional their relationship is with that brand. And amazingly, we actually found that content-led marketing can significantly improve consumers' subconscious positivity towards the advertising brand. So this is creating a deeper emotional relationship between them. So what this means is that after being exposed to the content, respondents were more positive towards the brand at a much faster rate than before viewing it. And this is just after one exposure. So you can think how much of an impact multiple pieces of content have on those who read it. And whilst content marketing can shift kind of these deeply entrenched perceptions, we also see it shifting kind of core advertising metrics as well, such as awareness, brand image, and consideration and recommendation. And my final point is actually we found that through our research that rooting the brand within the narrative of the content actually works much harder for the advertiser. So I think clearly labeling adjacent advertising leaves the consumer in absolutely no doubt as to what they're reading. So premium content providers are highly trusted by their readers, which means that integrating the brand into the content was a powerful subconscious endorsement of the advertiser, so much like a recommendation from a family member and friends. And we also know that consumers see this type of content as being quite an innovative way for brands to reach audiences, and that's why we see an impact on that innovation metric. It's kind of creating a halo effect for the brand by aligning themselves with this type of content. We want to ask ourselves, well, what does this mean for us? We are all in the business of creating content. What does the research tell us? What do we need to know when we embark on a content marketing campaign? And we've put together kind of 5 key guidelines. The first being that for a message for the industry as a whole is that we have to be transparent. We have to educate the industry because consumers will be much more receptive as a result. The content also needs to match the editorial quality because it meets the expectations of consumers and won't be incongruous to the editorial content it sits alongside. And the third point really is an interesting one because we are offering, as a result of this study, we are offering our premium advertisers the chance to test their content campaigns using this methodology around facial coding. So what we're asking brands to do is actually identify the emotions you want to trigger, set KPIs against it, and we can measure whether that's been achieved. Also already justified and helps add value to the story, then do integrate the brand with the narrative because it will work harder for the advertiser. And finally, consumers are much more trusting of content marketing when placed in a premium environment. So placing it in that environment allows the content to have credibility and therefore allow it to flourish and achieve the emotional engagement that it sets out to trigger. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. I think that's a really impactful case study, and from what you said, it sounds like there might be more for us to hear on the brand testing, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be great. Now we're going to hand over to Tim from IAB UK to tell about their research on devices, which was the winner of the consumer devices category. Hi, Tim.
Hello, Alison. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, all loud and clear. Thanks.
Fantastic. So I will whip through this pretty quickly. When we did the research was we wanted to investigate how different devices compete for attention in the living room. And the theory was that, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you just had the TV in the living room. Now lots of different devices, laptops, smartphones, etc., which have disrupted the way that people divide their attention in the living room. So we wanted to investigate that in a bit more detail. We Markler, the research agency, who are absolutely fantastic, and we basically did 3 things, 3 different elements of methodology. The first one was really simple in that we did an online survey of over 1,000 nationally representative online adults. The second one was really interesting. So we worked with an American company called Luth Research, and they were able to install a meter on people's devices that A, worked across all devices, so laptop, tablet, smartphone, Android and iOS, and B, really important thing is it worked equally in app or browser, so we were able to build up a really holistic view of the way that people use their devices. So we rated 47 people to do that over 7 days, and the really interesting thing was that on 2 nights we asked those people to watch a prescribed set of TV programs, and that allowed us very accurately to map device usage to what was happening on the TV, for example, whether it was a program or whether it was advertising content. And the third thing, we did an ethnographic study of 2 households, one in Manchester, one in London, and the London household also included some biometric data. This is a really interesting picture. This is actually one of the photos that came from the evening that we spent in Manchester, and actually sums up the research really nicely. You can see that the TV is on, but actually all 4 participants in the room are fully engaged in their smartphone. And if there's one picture that sums up the whole research, then this is pretty accurate. You can imagine we got a whole load of data back, and the way that we've chosen to sort of present it and to share it with the market is basically to challenge 3 sort of industry beliefs. The first one, or myths as we've called them, the first one is that the TV is the dominant screen in the living room, and the devices in some way are sort of second screens. We believe now that actually the research shows that all screens are equal when it comes to the living room. You've got a fragmentation of attention, but you've got no natural hierarchy between the screens. They're different sizes, they do different things, but they all compete really equally for attention. The second myth is that it's the TV stroke advertising content that determines how you behave in the living room. So the old-fashioned thing in that you watch the program, then the ads come on and you get up and you make a cup of tea or you go to the loo. We think actually now it's people's devices that determine how they behave in the living room. So the TV is on, but actually it's the device usage that really determines what happens. And the third myth is that people are multi-screening. Actually, I think what people are really doing is they're sort of switch screening very quickly between different screens. They're having tiny moments of content with one screen and then switching to another. So the results go into that in a lot of detail. But I just wanted to share, a couple of things from each of the different methodologies that kind of show you how we built up this picture. So this is pretty straightforward. This is from the quant element, and you can see in the orange and the pink circles that the majority of people we sampled agreed that mobile technology had changed the way that they consumed entertainment in the home. And actually only 50% of those people we sampled said that the TV is now the main focal point of the living room. We didn't ask them what the main focal point now was, but only half the people surveyed believe that the TV is the main focal point of the living room. This is some really interesting data from one of the 2 nights where we asked people to watch a certain set of TV programs. So you have 47 people, and you can see their device usage across all devices, both in app and in browser, is mapped with the blue peaks and troughs. And what we've done is we've got the TV schedule across the top, and then superimposed in pink the various different advertising breaks. So the first advertising break during the ITV evening news, there is an increase in device usage because maybe people have watched the news headlines, they've got the information they want, then the ads come on and they start using their devices a bit more. And actually you can also see at 8 o'clock at the start of the programme, Eternal Glory, device usage goes down, which sort of suggests that actually the probe is quite compelling. And what we were able to do, because we had 2 evenings and we had 21 breaks in total, we were able to analyse what happened in all of the breaks. And as you can see, in 8 of the advertising breaks, device usage went up. 6 of them it was consistent, and in 7 it went down. So our conclusion really is that there's no real relationship between advertising or TV program content and device usage. Device usage just kind of keeps going regardless of what's on the TV. This bit of data here is basically one of the London participants, and it's the biometric data. So we used skin sensors to measure moisture on people's hands. and that fluctuates according to, scientifically it's called arousal, but according to how much attention they're paying to stuff. And what we've done on this chart is we've mapped the top 10% of peaks in terms of the guy's attention in the living room. And you can see they come from a variety of sources. Some are from TV, some are from mobile, a few laptops. And about just after 9 o'clock, there is an instance where it's actually a sort of non-screen activity. He was talking to his wife, causes one of those peaks. If you look at everything across, we call them John and Joanna. If you look at all of their peak attention moments over the 2 evenings that we were with them, we saw actually roughly 40% came from TV in the room, 60% came from non-TV in the living room, and of that 60%, about 90% of that is digital. Turn to the myths. So we sort of wrap it all up. We think that all screens are equal. We think that the TV content stroke advertising no longer determines behaviour in the living room, and that actually rather than multi-screening, people are switch screening, having nano moments. They move very quickly between the different screens. So as you imagine, there's a whole ton of information, and we've got lots of different data cuts, but for today, that's just the slides that I wanted to go through.
Thanks, Tim. That's really interesting, and I very much like the way of doing it in debunking the myth.
Well, and it's gone down reasonably well in the market. I mean, we've had lots of interesting questions, so I think it worked well.
That's great. Okay, so let's move on to Toby to tell us about the ComScore research that won the Research and Data Innovation category, and looking at consumers' online and offline behaviour. Welcome, Toby.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you to everyone at the IAB Europe for allowing me the opportunity to present today. And thanks to everybody who's taken the time to dial in to listen to me, Tim, Andy, and to some of the research that we've done over the last 12 months or so. I'm going to spend 5 minutes, probably less even, talking to you about a piece of work that ComScore did last year with News UK that was called Project Footprint. No impact of advertising on consumers' behaviour is pretty important when you evaluate media investment and effectively when you assess the return on that investment. But too often people are still relying on kind of the simplistic models such as last click attribution, and they tell an incomplete story of the full effect of online advertising. So this piece of research that was commissioned by News UK, who are the owners of The Times, The Sun, a bunch of other brands, I'm sure people are familiar with News UK, that was done in conjunction with ComScore and a third party called Clafay, who are word of mouth consultancy. And the theme was to try to quantify this relation between what people read, what advertising they're exposed to, and then their subsequent online and offline behaviour to holistically understand the impact of that online advertising. So, well, News, ComScore and Clafay worked together, and we developed a kind of unique collaborative approach to better understand readers' habits, how advertising impacted their actions. The project involved recruiting 70 multi-platform subscribers of The Times, so that they consume Times content, they subscribe to the paper in its physical form, also were app subscribers, and they had access through their desktop PCs to Times content as well. We recruited these people for a month-long longitudinal study, we described it as, and subscribers all downloaded ComScore meters onto each of their digital devices, so desktop PCs, mobiles and tablets, to passively capture a complete view of their digital behaviour. Then, for those of you who don't know who ComScore are, well, we know what people do when they're on the internet. That's kind of the basis of it. And once people have loaded our meters to their devices, we can track pretty much everything that they do when they're online. The 70 tracked Times readers, they completed a daily bespoke diary app that was developed by Keller Fay to capture conversations and other offline behaviour. What was out of the study, which apart from anything that ComScore has done before in the UK, we had this true single source panel for the first time. So ComScore traditionally has a PC panel, a mobile panel, a tablet panel, but there isn't much in the way of an overlap. So we kind of do struggle to put it together a little bit, and we've come up with some very clear algorithms to help us to do that. But this study really that single source truth is something that I know that a lot of people have been searching for quite a while, and that's why this study is really unique for us. You know, we weren't reliant on marrying behaviours across sales for a limited set of websites or by looking at IPSs at a household level or anything like that. We really could see true behaviour across the entirety of the internet for these 70 people. And they were trackable across their 3 digital devices and then offline as well through this diary app. It led to having kind of a never seen before 360-degree view of these consumers. And for the month, we collected, I think it was something like 1.3 million rows of data, including 200,000 page views online, hundreds of thousands of adverts, 4,000 searches, over 1,400 word of mouth impressions, so conversations about the brands that we were looking at. And it was an absolute behemoth of a set of data. We combined the data at a respondent level and then analysed it to see if we could find some patterns in that behaviour. So briefly, to talk about a few of the results from the study. The research revealed a strong correlation between exposure and brand advocacy across 2 distinct planes. One angle, which is the data that's on the screen now, you can see that advocacy, which is a brand preference within a particular category, related with a high proportion of users being exposed to an ad from the brand that they like. Well, the people who are exposed to ads for a particular brand were more likely to be advocates for that brand. The startling results, 95% of advocates at any given supermarket brand saw an ad for their preferred brand during the month. 86% of banking brand advocates were exposed to ads for that brand, 5% of airline advocates and 65% of car advocates. And it's noting that all of the exposures happened on the website. Now, when it's online behaviour, audience is exposed to film-related advertising on the Times. So this is the chart on the right-hand side of this page. People were 111% more likely to search for or visit cinema website during the months that we were studying them. Those exposed to Marks and Spencer's ads, they were 50% more likely to search for M&S or visit the M&S website. And those who were exposed to Lloyds Bank adverts, 18% more likely versus a non-exposed group of people out of the kind of we were studying. It also drove higher offline action, and this is kind of the thing that ComScore has never been able to do before. So with Keller Fay on this, we were able to actually see that people had either made a decision about buying a car or buying a product within the set of categories that we were looking at. So in this instance, cars, that they had, so they'd done the purchasing or they'd made a brand choice about their next purchase. And with exposure really drive this higher offline action with an uplift of 163% for BMW ad exposure, 80% uplift for VW, and 33% for Audi versus a control group of those people who weren't exposed. So the big from the project was that online advertising works across several dimensions. And ComScore has done work before looking at the online behaviour post-advertising exposure, but this has taken things a step further. So through the study, we've been able to understand a complete view of effectiveness of digital advertising. And finding this observed behaviour online from a single panel across PC, tablets and smartphones with mouth insight from Compass, I suppose. We have learned a great deal about how exposure to advertising these conversations. It reinforces advocacy, in turn primes advocates to notice the online advertising and then take action. And it drives that online behaviour, and it really does stimulate the offline actions. We think that the more evidence that we can provide to advertisers and media buyers about the ROI that you can get from branding adverts, kind of on-branding adverts, in these engaging environments like the Times website, so we can move away from these simplistic, potentially flawed models like last-click attribution. And that's all I have, so thank you guys.
Thanks, Toby. Great. So we move on to Ian for today's last presentation. Over to you, Ian.
Great, thanks very much. Am I dropping the presentation now, Alison? Yeah.
You are, yes.
Okay.
So you just need to use those little arrows at the top of the window.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Ian Gibbs. I head up the commercial insight team at The Guardian. I'm going to talk to you about a piece of work that we conducted a year ago now, the Guardian Guide to Context, which I'm pleased won a IAB Europe Award for Best Use of Budget, which is great. Now, obviously, discussions around, I suppose, the relevance of context in advertising, the impact of contextually relevant advertising, they're new in a way. We've been talking about this stuff for years, but I think there is a point to be made that actually, over the last couple of years, I think these discussions have picked up more relevance and salience as we look at some of the pressures that sort of the digital advertising ecosystem face. And by that, I mean, in the UK in particular, the likes of Google and Facebook they follow up something like 85% of all of the market now. There are sort of, as the rest of the sort of publishing world, the sort of media industry, media owners, there is something to be said around the value that's placed around context, which may explain some of that. Now, as I mentioned, discussions around context are nothing new. Sort of no marketing presentation would be complete without a quote from Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Tipping Point, which was released a whopping 6 years ago now. So he talks about context. He talks about the fact that, it's the key to getting people to change their smallest behaviour sometimes. It lies in the smallest details in their immediate situation. The power of context says that human beings are a lot more sensitive to their environment than they may seem. And this kind of, this is essentially what we want to test, whether an editorially relevant environment is subtle or sensitive enough, or I suppose in terms of the way people connect with it, have an impact on the advertising that is placed within it. Now, I guess you could say, well, we were talking about this 15, 16 years ago. Why are we talking about context now? Well, I think there are a number of reasons. We undeniably live in a world where there is more competition for consumers' attention than ever before. There's a complete sort of scarcity of attention. Attention is really at a premium. It's not that just we have different media channels vying for people's attention, radio, TV, online, etc. But, within specific channels we have a lot of competition. In fact, even within platforms we have competition. You just have to look at Facebook. You have brands and publishers which are vying for attention with sort of personal updates and posts, all at the whim of Facebook's algorithm. So, there is a battle for attention everywhere, both offline and online, off-platform and within platform. There's also a complete sort of scarcity of premium media environments. It's an oft-quoted stat that, mankind manages to record and store as much information every day now that, as they did in the entirety of history up to the year 2000. I think there's no denying that the majority of that information or that content is stored is digital. But I think, it's very hard to say that the vast majority of that is premium. And I think, premium environments are what advertisers crave. And I think it's for us to prove the value of advertising in those environments. And last but not least, we've seen an absolute explosion in programmatic advertising and programmatic trading over the last few years, which is probably worth dwelling on a little bit more. Of course, programmatic is fantastic in terms of delivering efficient advertising with minimal resources, targeting consumers in weird and wonderful ways. We do have to consider, though, that, we do live in a world where, if you look at some of the stats from people like Statista, half of all internet traffic out there potentially is non-human, search algorithms and everything. So you remove half all the internet traffic, and then you consider that perhaps, another 20%, if you're in the UK, for example, another 20% of users are blocking ads. And of those who are sort of remained, potentially 40% of those ads are actually viewable. So you have to start asking yourself, in this kind of world of diminishing returns, how do we maximise the impact of those sort of remaining impressions, those remaining views? Are they seen in the right environment? And what's the impact of seeing advertising in the right environment? I think at The Guardian, we have a challenge here, because much like any publisher, programmatically, a piece of inventory that appears on, say, a recipe for lasagna online, an article which might have taken 5 minutes to write, often programmatically that's valued exactly the same as an ad which is placed on an article which might refer to a piece of investigative journalism which took 6 months to compile. There's a clear differential there in terms of the quality of input, but perhaps not necessarily on the value of advertising in its place. So that's something that we need to consider in the programmatic world. So, for us, I think there are obviously I've talked about context a lot, but of course context means different things to different people. Of course, context can refer to location, whether you see advertising just outside of a store when you're shopping, or whether you see it on a desktop computer when you work. It might refer to platform, mobile versus desktop versus tablet. It might even refer to, I suppose, different media environments, whether you see something at home on TV or whether you see something in the cinema or whatever. Also a time of day argument, do people respond to advertising differently, whether they're on their early morning commute versus when sort of leaning back and relaxing in the evening. For us, though, we decided to specifically focus this piece of research on editorial relevance. So what is the impact of seeing an ad when it appears alongside relevant editorial? What is the impact on seeing a travel ad which appears alongside travel content versus a travel ad which appears elsewhere? And I think for us, we are exploring these other areas, but I think this is what really gets to the heart of how we value our inventory, I suppose, in an increasingly programmatic world. And to do this, we didn't actually commission a new piece of research for this. For us, The Guardian, this is very much a data mining exercise. For the last 8 years, we've been running ad effectiveness tests through a panel. It's a panel administered by the Swedish ad effectiveness research company RAM, Research and Analysis of Media. Fortunately, so when we set up this panel, it was primarily used to test just one-off campaigns. Fortunately, over time, we've built up a really robust normative database across hundreds of campaigns, and fortunately had the foresight to sort of code up with these campaigns where ads were running, what they looked like, and who was responding to them, etc. So we're able to go back and mine this data and have a look at ads which are running contextually relevant editorial environments and compare them to similar, in terms of category, similar ads which haven't run in the same editorial environment. I guess this is the hypothesis that we're trying to test here. I mean, you just have to look at, there's a huge body of research out there, and often you get quite conflicting results or answers in terms of whether contextual relevance matters. There's lots of work out there which suggests, yes, contextual relevance does matter. It's emotional primer. If you look at a car ad and a car website, there is some emotional priming that process does and makes you more receptive to the advert. There's also plenty of research out there which suggests the opposite, which suggests that the cognitive dissonance is what has an impact. If a piece of ad is completely at odds with the editorial environment in which it appears, it's much more likely to stand out. Now, to be honest, there are subtleties in whether this is referring to brand advertising or response advertising, but we very much test this hypothesis, and I think it's worth pointing out now that we are very much looking at this within the context of brand advertising, not response advertising. That's for another day. So, top line. Our results suggested that across the 92 contextually relevant campaigns that we looked at online, that there was indeed an effect of contextual relevance. So, for example, travel ads that were seen in we looked at 6 categories, and we'll come on to those in a second, but ads that were seen in an editorially relevant environment, they were found by consumers to be more beneficial to themselves. They were found to have higher levels of brand favourability. They were found to be more informative, and the ad itself was seen to be more appealing. So what was more interesting for us is that when we drill down to category, you do tend to see slightly different effects by category as well, as we can see here. So, for example, with the travel category, the metric that really outperformed was ad appeal. And I think you just have to look at travel ads. They tend to be quite visually appealing, quite consistent with the visuals that you'll find on a travel website. You have sandy beaches, great big cityscapes, and there was certainly some sort of booster effect that we saw there in terms of ad appeal. Tech ads, it was all about offering you information. We know at The Guardian that people who tend to come to a tech website they tend to be more likely to be in market, they're making purchases, they're looking for help making those purchases, so looking for information is what really benefited here. For finance, it's all about offering a sort of a beneficial ad experience. I think, interestingly, for finance, those ads that appeared in a contextually relevant environment weren't necessarily found to be more appealing or more informative. I guess there is a question here that finance ads are pretty boring wherever you see them. However, they were found to be enormously more beneficial to consumers when seen in a sort of finance contextually relevant environment. For fashion and beauty, they were also found to be more informative, similar story to tech. The big boost for arts and entertainment ads appearing in arts and entertainment environments was positivity towards the advertiser, brand favourability. I think that's quite an important one for us as well, because I think there tends to be a set perception out there, a reluctance sometimes around arts and entertainment advertisers to advertise in these environments, because they sort of believe that the consumers are only listening to the reviews. Would you really want to advertise your film in an environment where a consumer has been reading a negative film review, for example? I think here this shows that actually that's not always the case, and that actually arts and ents ads can have a positive impact in the right contextually relevant environment. This is just a whistle-stop tool. There's loads of sort of deep dives by each category available online as well. We did have a quick look at print. To be honest, we don't have the same level of detail for print. The contextual argument isn't quite the same. People are more obsessed with sort of positioning newspaper than they are online. But we did, for those few contextually relevant campaigns that we saw, there was a positive impact on benefit and brand appeal for those that were seen there as well. For us, this is only the beginning of the sort of the journey when it comes to looking at contextual relevance. The next steps for us, we want to try and repeat the same exercise for mobile. Do people recognise that they are in different contextual environments and mobile as much as they do on desktop? And if the answer is no, does text have such an impact? We also want to try and figure out whether we can build sort of contextual impact into the planning process. We've developed a cross-platform planning tool called Audiences Not Platforms. At the moment, it seems that all impacts are equal. We will see if we can adapt that according to where people are seeing advertising. And then the final point we want to investigate is the benefits of complementary rather than matching editorial environments. So, for example, what works second best for a finance ad? Actually, does a finance ad work in a travel environment because people are looking for information on how to fund their holiday, for example? So there's lots of questions that have been raised by this, but ultimately I think, this has proven the hypothesis and the first step of the journey that contextual relevant advertising really does matter in a programmatic world. So that's me. Thanks very much.
Ian, and if you don't mind, I'm going to kick off straight away with a question for you on that presentation.
Yeah.
So the details that you provided are really interesting, and obviously it makes you smile when you read hear the observations regarding, for example, the benefits of the finance ads and the other categories.
Yeah.
How has this piece of research been received by the market, and what changes have you seen in terms of people's ideas and requests when they come to you in terms of campaigns they want to run?
It's a good question. I think, to be honest, intuitively people do get it. It confirms what seems to make sense to us from a branding point of view. I think, though, this isn't the only lens by which I think we need to plan now. This is just another lens. And I think the most important thing that we do on top of this as a publisher is sort of overlay our first-party data and make sort of informed planning decisions on top of that. So, for example, and get quite smart about contextually relevant advertising. For example, we worked with a telecoms brand recently, and we had a look at what their audience were interested most on our site. They were most interested in football. They were most interested in reading live updates around football. So it wasn't just about us saying to this telecoms brand, advertise in the telecoms area of the site or in the tech area, advertise in football, but adapt your display creative to have a football message, perhaps focusing on mobile data speed so people can get these live updates where and when they want it. So, it's quite nuanced, but I think it has to be coupled with use of our first-party planning data, analytics data as well.
Yeah, and it's got big implications for programmatic, as you mentioned, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and the two aren't mutually exclusive. We've seen an absolute explosion in the rise of private marketplaces now as people get, as people want quality assurance and trust. And you, of course, can sell contextually relevant advertising programmatically, but it's just about making people aware of that fact.
Yeah, okay, super. That's really interesting. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to Tim next. And ask about the real living results and how you see that affecting media planning moving forward. Tim, do you want to make a comment on that? What do you think they mean for media planning?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we're trying to do is to get people to think about what actually happens in the living room. So to get people away from the assumption that the TV is the only way to command people in those high attention moments. So it's really to sort of challenge the dominance of TV, but also to get people to think about how to grab someone's attention and how to hold it, whatever screen you're using. So I think our research shows that people jump from one screen to another very quickly, and if you're not able to offer them very compelling content almost immediately, they're going to give up and move somewhere else. So it's about grabbing their attention, holding it, and it's also about understanding what really happens in the living room. In the UK, people watch about 3.5 hours of TV a day, but the TV might be on, but they might be very focused on another device. So it's just really getting media planners to think about what modern life is really like in terms of devices and attention.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. I think that there's lessons from media planners from all of these studies, aren't there, which is, I think it kind of makes us all think overall about how much media planning is changing and how many new rules come into play on an ongoing basis, really. I think the big question, Andrew, in terms of emotions is that we're talking here about content marketing triggering emotions, and how far do we want to go? Do you have any information about, the scale and size of that, Andrew? Thoughts about, well, these are good, certain emotions are good ones to trigger, and others might be bad ones to trigger. How much of that have you been able to find out with the research so far? Have we got through? I think we've Andrew's attention.
Yes. I'm here. My phone's not working very well. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Don't worry, that's fine. Laid plans, Andrew. Did you get what
was the question? What question?
The question was around triggering emotions via content-led marketing, and how far should brands go, really? Because there's obviously a whole range of emotions out there that the brand wants to say, it would be great to really engage those consumers and really draw emotion in order to get them engaged. But are there any kind of rules or experiences that you've had that says, such and such is a safe place, and going further might be not such a safe place for the brands to go?
Well, I think what I'm saying is that brands can be bold. They can tackle difficult subjects which trigger emotions such as fear and sadness. I don't think brands should be nervous about doing that. And actually, some of the content we tested delivered that. I mean, we did a piece for HSBC which was about the difficulty of maintaining long-distance relationships, which naturally delivered a kind of a sadness and a quite an emotive response. That impacted very positively on the brand. It didn't have any negative impact. So I think we're comfortable in saying to our advertisers that don't always go after the happy emotions. You can go harder, and it won't impact negatively on the brand, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to achieve engagement with content. As long as you're achieving that emotional engagement and giving people what they want and something that is informative or entertaining, then it's a positive impact for the brands involved.
Oh, super, thanks. And with Toby, I just wanted to ask you how you think that brands can use the results of your research to ensure that their online brand advertising drives offline actions. So what do you think are some practical applications that people can pick up from this?
I think I'm actually going to link to Ian's presentation. Having not seen it work before, I'm really impressed with it. And kind of one of the key findings that he found in a bit of work that we did, and that has then just been entirely reiterated by what Ian has said, is making sure that the ad is relevant. And that comes from putting it in the right place, but secondly, from targeting the right people who are consuming that content. So finding out as much as you can about the people that you're putting the ad in front of before you put the ad in front of them, I think is really, really important. And that is what will then help drive that offline action. So in Times example that I talk about has shown us that these premium publishers really can reach a large proportion of people who are already brand advocates, and that's a good starting point. But not every advert is going to work, that's fairly obvious, but it definitely has a building effect that hasn't been tapped into to its fullest extent yet. And P&Gs of the world and the Reckitt Benckises who are slowly shifting money to digital ecosystem, they're, I think, finally realizing that you can reach a lot of people, you can reach the right people pretty easily with kind of succinct targeting, and when you do that, the brand building that you can get from online just transfers offline kind of with any extra effort. So it really is about, relevance of the ad and find the right people to advertise to, and then online will follow the exposure that you found online.
Well, very much like an online, a foot first with online approach, also as Tim was stating earlier. So do any other speakers have any other questions or comments for each other? So I think this is a really nice opportunity to get guys together, and thanks very much for that. So are there any final observations that the four of you have before we close?
Well, I think Alison, the only thing I would say, it's in here, is that I think it's interesting actually that we look at the growth in things like programmatic, and actually I think we've all realised with research that there has to be planning implications for research. You can't just sort of land this stuff and then sort of say, that's great, off we go. We have to think about how we integrate these sort of insights, even as a sort of lens rather than a perhaps hard and fast sort of statistical kind of application to planning process, because there's just more and more noise and sort of planning data to cut through these days. So this sort of stuff is really important.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a really good note to finish on, Ian. This is really important. So thanks very much, everybody, for your presentations today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope everybody will be busy downloading them from the IAB Europe website, and look forward to speaking with you in another seminar soon. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.